Okay. Recently, I managed to acquire a pair of Depleted Uranium Discarding Sabot 7.62x51mm NATO rounds, known colloquially as DUDS. Made by the now defunct Pacific Technica, these rounds were quite expensive, and although one of them was damaged, I fully intended to inspect, restore, and fire one of these rounds against ceramic plates to test its capabilities and become the first person on the internet to showcase and use a nuclear weapon. Unfortunately, I've been politely informed that there might be some legal snags to the scheme, and I will, at least for now, not be shooting these rounds. It is at least some conciliation that they prove that nothing is beyond my reach. Instead, this video will go into detail on the capabilities, construction, and specific legal issues surrounding this armor-piercing depleted uranium small arms ammo for your education and entertainment. Speaking of depleted uranium ammo and previously classified information, this video is sponsored by War Thunder. I got my start on YouTube thanks in part to this game, and my statistics prove it's compelling enough to be worth playing. I found the game's damage model incorporating every individual part instead of using an antiquated health bar system to be particularly refreshing, especially when considering that over 2,000 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from over 100 years ago to the modern day have those parts modeled in. It's particularly nerve-wracking when a well-researched human opponent will specifically target your tank's weak spots and ammo racks. There isn't a lack of players to fight either, considering that the game is cross-platform and runs on PC, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, or PlayStation 4 and 5, plus the game is free. You can use my link in the description to get some free items in the game to help get you started. Lots of information to cover here. These DUDS rounds are saboted 308 rounds created out of a call for an experimental batch of DU small arms ammo for Air Force testing in the 70s. There was also research into DU flechette ammunition at around the same time, with projectiles clocking in at over 4,000 feet per second. DU is used in many military projectiles for several reasons, including the high density and thus high resulting penetration of the material, incendiary effects against the material, and self-sharpening effects of the round on contact with hardened materials. Conventional bullets have a habit of blunting as they penetrate. DU resists this effect. What's unusual about DUDS is that usually the military doesn't use DU in small arms. However, these rounds were created out of a time when DU ammo was being experimented on for feasibility on all weapons platforms and calibers. Lots of large caliber DU hit the scene at around the same time, and after much sleuthing, I can conclusively say that DUDS rounds never saw any combat use, clandestine or otherwise. Nevertheless, 50 years later, they still represent the cutting edge of armor penetration, an easy thing to deduce when the projectiles are expected to reach speeds of up to 3,500 feet per second and higher. Usually military 7.62x51 rounds don't go much more than 3,000 feet per second. I managed to get my hands on two of the rounds that I authenticated by literally taking radiation measurements. One of the rounds was damaged, devoid of powder with the brass having been fired, and I could actually remove the projectile from the brass. Although this round would have to be restored, the damage made the authentication much easier as I could examine the actual projectile. The first thing I noticed was it was missing the clear plastic buffer on the bottom of the round. That piece is likely to keep the powder compressed against the primer to reduce the chance of any hangfire event due to the projectile's smaller size. So a 3D printed one was created to replace it. The base of the round also has a threaded aluminum buffer that's probably there to keep the plastic sabot petals together on firing. The intact round was disassembled to get powder measurements, finding it to be a very compressed load. The brass had also been compressed more than usual around the projectile to hold it in place, and it was not easy to disassemble it. And voila, 2 rounds were reloaded. The only thing now was to shoot one, preferably with a bolt-action rifle and a long piece of string due to the hot nature of the powder load. There were some health concerns, and any impact could release uranium oxide into the air, which is very hazardous to the lungs. However, with self-containment for the environment and safety measures being taken, the danger was mitigated. There still remained legal sensitivities with the use and possession of radioactive material, however. Federal law exists under the term prohibited transactions involving nuclear materials. This law was largely created with the context of terrorism and dirty bombs in mind. It exists in spirit to help prevent the proliferation of nuclear materials in the creation of radioactively spiked dirty bombs. And what those are conventional bombs that have been spiked with radioactive material in order to irradiate the area around them. Basically, they just spread radioactive crap everywhere. The spirit of the law itself is to make sure that nuclear material is under control and isn't being traded on the black market. It also punishes those who would make dirty bombs. One part of the law says if I make unauthorized use, disposition, or transfer of nuclear material or nuclear byproduct material belonging to another, I could be prosecuted. However, 50 years after these rounds have been produced, it is impossible to determine who owned them, if they were Pacific Technica's or government property. They're not serialized or anything. Furthermore, I have no intention of harming anyone by shooting them. So as far as I can tell, it is legal for me to possess and shoot these rounds. However, I'm a member of the US military and I don't want to potentially be made an example of it. So for now, they're going to be sitting pretty. Eventually, if it becomes clear I won't be prosecuted for doing so, I will shoot them, and when that happens, I will joyfully share the results. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Some of War Thunder's vehicles actually make use of various depleted uranium ammunition types like the A-10, and you can outright drop nukes in some game modes. Use my link in the description, and try War Thunder out.
Man, those Chinook guys are so awesome.
They are the coolest people ever.
I agree. I feel honored to be in their presence.
I feel as though...
Dropping back down about 500 AGL.
Yeah, Roger, we'll maintain 81.
Okay.
If it were not for me being saddled with this career as an Apache pilot, I too would like to fly Chinook someday.
I agree. I just don't feel like I'd be worthy.
Nor do I. Which is why I sit in the back seat of this attack aircraft, longing, wishing to one day be a Chinook pilot.
Touche, touche.